Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
As the COVID-19 pandemic spreads, leaders around the world are invoking executive powers, passing emergency decrees and legislation expanding their remits, using the crisis to grab more power. Joining us now, Susan Rice, former National Security Advisor for President Obama, former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. Her New York Times bestselling book is Tough Love, My Story of the Things Worth Fighting For. Susan Rice, thank you very much for joining us. Let's talk about Hungary, for example. The parliament there passing a controversial bill giving their leader, Viktor Orban, sweeping emergency powers that far-right political leaders in Italy are defending now and others around are modeling.
It's really quite extraordinary. We've had a problem, obviously, in Hungary for quite a while where Viktor Orban has repeatedly demonstrated his autocratic tendencies. But this power grab is near complete. He's taken all the reins indefinitely, and there's nothing to check him. And so we now have a member of the European Union that is essentially an outright dictatorship. And, you know, given the values, given the institutions of the European Union, can be tolerated. We've seen it elsewhere, as you point out, from the Philippines, of course, where you wouldn't be surprised to see it, to Israel, where you might be surprised to see it, where Prime Minister Netanyahu has also used this opportunity to consolidate power under him and eliminate a number of freedoms that Israelis have become accustomed to. So this is a trend, and it's a worrying trend, and it's one we have to guard against and stand up very clearly in opposition to.
Now, Secretary Pompeo has seemingly backed down a little bit from what he has been referring to as the Wuhan virus. We've seen this after a call between President Trump and President Xi in China. But it did, the Wuhan virus meme that came from Pompeo did break up a G7 foreign ministers call last week where they couldn't reach agreement on steps forward because of the insistence by the American Secretary of State that this be blamed on China.
Andrea, it's shameful. I mean, for the United States to be race baiting and to be a virus which never has a flag, can't have a flag, as being the provenance of one country is designed to be divisive. It's designed to stigmatize people of Asian descent. And it's certainly not the way the leadership of the United States, the Secretary of State, the President of the United States ought to be behaving in the best of times, but certainly not in a crisis. The reality is that viruses can arise in any corner of the globe and spread to any corner of the globe. In 2009, when we were dealing with the swine flu pandemic, that arose in North America, in Mexico, and then in the United States before it spread across the planet. So it doesn't serve us well. It doesn't serve the objective of squelching the virus globally to brand it in nationalistic or xenophobic or racist terms. We all have to work together on this. We can stamp out this virus effectively eventually in the United States. China may be able to do it on its side of the world, but if it's not stamped out everywhere, it will come back, be resurgent, and be our problem yet again. So the reality of this is we have a global problem. It's worse in the United States right now. It's worse, frankly, than it needed to be, given the lack of preparedness, given a lack of focus, given downplaying of the threat, a lost 2 months where the administration didn't take the time that we could have utilized to put in place the mechanism so that we had the masks, we had the ventilators, we had the tests, and now we're playing catch up. But it didn't need to be this bad. When the President of the United States gleefully says on Sunday that we will have done a very good job if we can limit the deaths in the United States to 100 to 200,000 people, I'm not sure what circle of hell one has to be in for that to be a very good outcome. It's a tragic, terrible outcome. And now Ambassador Deborah Birx, the White House coordinator, is saying that's the best case scenario if we all do our utmost. So this is a challenge that we have first and foremost here in the United States, but it's also a global challenge. It's going to require all of us to do our parts, from social distancing to supporting our healthcare workers and our first responders. And it's going to require presidential leadership of a sort we have not yet ever seen from Donald Trump.
And finally, we just have a few seconds left. I just want to share one of your tweets, your tweet about Yamiche Alcindor. And you wrote, "You go, girl, pathetic when insecure men can't stomach strong black women." Brief comment?
Andrea, the only thing I might add to that is maybe I should have just said strong women, because he has a particular problem, it seems, with black women. But I think, as was pointed out in your earlier segment, it's a problem that applies to women with strong personalities and a willingness to stand up for themselves and their beliefs across the board. It's a sad thing. It's a reflection of one's own insecurity. It's not a reflection of the talents or the capacities of the women we're talking about. And I hope very much that we can move beyond that. It's so unbecoming in the context of a national crisis for the president to lash out at individuals, whether the governor of Michigan or the Speaker of the House or a reporter who asks a very fair, tough question. So, as I said, for us to get through this maximally, it's going to require each of us as citizens to do our parts. Thank God for the governors and the mayors and those who are stepping up and taking this crisis as seriously as it deserves to be taken. But at the end of the day, there isn't a substitute for leadership coming out of the White House. The White House needs to be stepping in, prioritizing the procurement, the federal procurement of masks, of tests, of PPE, of ventilators, and distributing them on a rational basis. They can't have states competing against each other, states competing against the federal government. It's chaos, and we don't need that kind of chaos. We need leadership.
It is Wednesday, the 1st of April of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook at Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these foolish priests? Oh my. Well, priests in this construct would be any religious leader or self-ascribed religious leaders intoning about how to, cure the coronavirus by shunning the devil. Yeah, the coronavirus is our punishment for essentially being a representative democracy, promoting representative democracies around the world, and civil liberties must be the work of the devil. According to the priesthood of white evangelicals, they just need themselves an authority daddy figure. I don't know why, but they do. Okay, well, Trump yesterday, for the first time, affected a somber mood. And I gotta tell you, that somber mood that he projected seemed pretty darn real. And many pundits remarked that it was rather presidential. Well, they've been saying that for a long time. Every time he takes a more cautious, or shall we say low-key approach in his vocalizations. Yeah, he was rather somber. And the reason for it is that he finally, I think for the first time, realized the possibility of this pandemic and its repercussions. Whereupon he, for the first time, saw the utter decimation of his political campaign and re-election. That guy was sad. Yeah. it's going to be a tough couple of weeks because his numbers are probably going to take a dump. And they haven't been really spiking like we've been hearing. What's up with the New York Times saying that pretty much a vast majority of Americans believe that Trump is doing a good job? Who did they interview? The same Pennsylvania diners that are all Trump brats? They keep doing it. They keep going to the same diner, interviewing and polling the same Trump advocates every time. Why do they do that? Basket. Why? Basket? I mean Beckett. Why? Well, apparently, if you want the President of the United States off your back, you gotta say nice things about him. Even if you don't believe it, you just gotta say it. Well, you should affect a sincerity, of course. And they do. I just noticed in that clandestine phone call. Well, it wasn't clandestine in and of itself, but the release of the phone call seemed rather clandestine. Now, remember, this was a phone call with the governors of the United States. So a participant, meaning a governor, released that phone call, wherein Trump says, I've not heard anything about testing going wrong for a couple of weeks because, Donnie, your people are afraid of you, and that's how Mafia Dons work. They gain respect out of fear. And then there's a Stockholm Syndrome aspect to it because then that leader they fear, they also love. Just like the Mafia Don uses his position to instill fear and in return some love. Now, it might be begrudging from some quarters, but those begrudging quarters will be eliminated, and they usually are, by the Mafia Don. So this guy, for the first time yesterday, actually saw the danger that this pandemic can wring out in the world, and specifically to this guy's re-election. He actually sees for the first time that it's just not hope. And this is the other thing. He's out there talking about, everybody's got to be positive thinkers. You're just trying to destroy hope. All we ever heard for 8 years was Obama being dissed for wanting people to have hope. And now Donald Trump is calling out Yamiche Alcindor for asking a question that might question the use of false hope to give the American public the idea that it's okay to drink bleach. It's okay to drink aquarium cleaner. It's okay, to just throw some acid on you. That'll kill the germ. Might kill you too, but sometimes the cure is worse than the disease. Sometimes. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy at the top? That was Susan Rice. Oh, yeah, she was part of the Obama administration. I love her. Well, she criticized the Hungarian prime minister, that would be Orban, for using the pandemic in an illegal power grab. Except it's not so illegal because once you change the laws, what was once illegal is now legal. Everything the Nazis did during World War II was legal. Every bit of it. On the rest of the menu, Trump's rollback of the 1918 Migratory Bird Treaty Act could kill billions of birds. Yeah, not just windmills. Apparently not just windmills kill birds. New Yorkers cheer the city's healthcare workers from their windows every day at 7 p.m., but Trump keeps accusing them of being thieves every day at his virus pressers. Every day. And Trump wants to send ventilators abroad as U.S. patients are forced to share. Quid pro quo. I think there's a quid pro quo here. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where furloughed crews from Scandinavian airline SAS are taking a 3-day course in basic hospital duties to help Sweden battle the pandemic. And the Paris Club of Creditor Nations agreed to cancel $1.4 billion of Somalia debt. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. The bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and she does so much more. Thank you, Kelly. And do stay safe, and everybody send good wishes. Kelly is in an epicenter of the pandemic, living in Manhattan. So do stay safe. Keep washing your hands. Don't shake hands with anyone. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is our link to our Patreon page. And I know that times are tough, but those of you who have recurring donations or contributions to Netroots Radio through Patreon, we thank you so much for continuing those. And if there's any of you out there who could afford an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, even during this time of distress, it really helps us because the bills still have to be paid. And I've noticed that a couple of our vendors have raised their prices. So thank you for your generosity in allowing us to pay our bills. It means that we as Resistance Radio get to slide under the radar just a little bit and continue our civic duty as the founders originally intended, even before the signing of the Constitution of the United States of America. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so simple. Do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. And Tom had been in the epicenter also up here in outside of Portland. So, but I'm not going to tell you where he is now, but he's with family and not in the Portland area. Good. All right. Thank you, Tom, and do stay safe as well. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam, and I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up on social media except for Facebook. I still have 13 days left. Damn you, Mark Zuckerberg. How dare you suspend and censor political speech from the free press? Now, if you don't want to be a utility, it doesn't matter because we're going to make you one anyway, buddy. All right. So if you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Okay, let's dive into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and Amy Beth Hansen and Matthew Brown of the Associated Press brings us this first offering. Dateline, Butte, Montana. That's a mighty fine butte. No, that's a mound. And a rat purty one, too. At a former open-pit copper mine filled with billions of gallons of toxic water, sirens, and loud pops from propane cannons echo off the granite walls to scare away birds so they don't land. After several thousand migrating snow geese perished in the Berkeley pit's acidic, metal-laden waters in 2016, its owners deployed a sophisticated arsenal to frighten away flocks, including lasers, drones, fireworks, and remote-controlled boats. Montana Resources already had been hazing incoming birds with spotlights and rifle shots into the water, and a spokesman says those existing deterrents likely helped the company avoid a penalty or prosecution under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. But the Trump administration wants to end the 50-year practice of using the criminal penalties under the migratory bird law to pressure companies into taking measures like these to prevent unintentional bird deaths. Critics, including top Interior Department officials from Republican and Democratic administrations, say the change could devastate threatened and endangered species and accelerate a bird population decline across North America since the 1970s. Wow, dioxin wasn't the only one then, was it? Former U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Director Dan Ash told the AP the law's threat of prosecution served as a brake on industry that had saved probably billions of birds. Removing that obligation, if it stands over the next several decades, will result in billions of birds being casualties, Ash said, who served in the Obama administration. The Trump administration dismissed Ash's dire prediction, contending companies will continue to avoid bird deaths voluntarily, just like your landlord's going to voluntarily not take your rent today because they're such good citizens. The 1918 Migratory Bird Law came after many U.S. bird populations had been decimated by hunting and poaching, much of it for feathers for women's hats. Over the past half-century, the law also was applied against companies that failed to prevent foreseeable bird deaths. However, the Trump administration says deaths of birds that fly into oil pits, mining sites, telecommunication towers, wind turbines, and other hazards should be treated as accidents and not subject to prosecution. And an Interior Department proposal would cement that into federal regulations. State officials and wildlife advocates who are suing the administration in federal court say birds already are being harmed under actions allowed by a 2017 Trump administration legal memo that signaled the rule change. Most notable was the destruction last fall of nesting grounds for 25,000 shorebirds in Virginia to make way for a road and tunnel project. Nothing stands in the way of progress. State officials had ended conservation measures for the birds after federal officials advised such measures were voluntary under the new interpretation of the law. Give a rat a cookie, they're going to want a tunnel and a road and get rid of all the birds. Dan Desai Martin of the American Independent brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. As New Yorkers applaud and cheer the city's healthcare workers from their windows every day at 7 p.m., Donald Trump is accusing them of being thieves, because that's what he is. At a Monday press briefing from the Rose Garden, he accused healthcare professionals of stealing medical equipment, such as much-needed masks, and did so without offering any evidence, except he said, I talked to a guy. Who was that guy, John Barron? I expressed what was told to me by tremendous power in the business, Trump said during his White House press briefing. He did not name a supposed source because it's John Barron. He claimed that he'd been told masks are going out the back door in hospitals in New York City, one of the global epicenters of the coronavirus pandemic. When you go from 10,000 masks to 300 masks, Trump said, there's something going on. Yes, a pandemic, and they're changing their mask more than they usually do yet. Ugh. Now, let's be clear. The reason Trump thinks that nurses would take masks out the back door and sell them on the black market during a pandemic is because that is exactly what Trump will do and probably is doing right now. Why else is he holding ventilators hostage from the United States of America? He added that he's not making any changes, but then told a reporter to go to the hospitals and found out why. Yeah, they do, and there's no there, buddy. Well, Monday was not the first time Trump accused doctors and nurses of being thieves. In fact, he did it even yesterday. On Sunday, he made the same unfounded allegation during a White House press conference. And there is no evidence to back up claims of widespread thievery by New York hospital workers. And the Trump accusation did not set well with New York medical professionals. I wonder why. In a Sunday statement, Kenneth Rask, the president of the Greater New York Hospital Association, said healthcare workers deserve better than their president, suggesting that PPE is going out the back door of New York hospitals. He added that medical professionals are treating exploding numbers of COVID-19 patients around the clock, willingly and without complaint. And in New York City, many doctors and nurses are being encouraged to reuse protective equipment. Now, let me just mention a little personal note here. My sister is 64 years old, my little sister. And she has been somewhat furloughed since the beginning of this because she's in the target group. Oh, I failed to mention my sister is a nurse. She goes back to work today because of staff shortages. And she also runs the respiratory unit for all of Josephine County. Donald Trump has no idea what it is to be in service to another human being in spite of the danger to your own health. Israel, also of the American Independent, brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Trump administration is now urging hospitals, which are already rationing resources, to make patients share ventilators as a last resort amid the growing COVID-19 pandemic. Trump himself claimed on Monday that the nation would soon have so many extra ventilators that it would be able to ship them to Europe. Oh, really? At cost or for profit? Asked whether there would be enough ventilators for the American people as the number of coronavirus cases continues to grow, Trump answered, "Yes, I do think so. I think we're going to be in a very good shape." Noting that several companies had turned their focus to ventilator manufacturing, he added, "As we outpace what we need, we're going to send them to Italy. We're going to send them to France. We're going to send them to Spain, where they will have tremendous problems in other countries as we can." Trump made a similar claim earlier Monday on Fox News. While Trump has promised the federal government would be a backup for states attempting to purchase additional ventilators, many have struggled to get what they need. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo complained yesterday that was Tuesday, The states were being forced to bid against each other and the federal government to get the few ventilators currently available. Do we really have to learn that 50 states shouldn't compete against 50 states? And that FEMA shouldn't come in late and compete with 50 states? It's not like you had to go to Harvard Kennedy School to learn this. Yeah, but apparently the classes that Trump skipped at Wharton, they must have taught that. I wonder. The Wall Street Journal reported that the NYU Langone Health Center in New York City had told emergency room doctors they had discretion to withhold futile intubations due to the lack of available ventilators. And they urged doctors to think more critically about who we intubate. Oh, you mean a death panel? Politico reported yesterday, Tuesday, that new guidelines from Surgeon General Jerome Adams and Admiral Brett Gilroy, Trump's Assistant Secretary for Health, suggested that as an absolute last resort, 2 patients could be forced to share the same ventilator, and at least one New York hospital has reportedly started using the untested approach. Asked last week whether Trump would guarantee that everyone who needs a ventilator will get one, Trump demurred, calling the reporter who made the inquiry a cutie pie and a wise guy. Mobsters got a mob. All right, that brings us to our break period, and we better get to our break. When we get back from that said break, we are going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, for Kumbaya moments, look elsewhere. Some movies are designed to bring people together. Craig Zobel's new The Hunt is not one of them. The film, which was originally to premiere last September, was held back due to 2 contemporaneous mass shootings. The Hunt is an ultra-violent satire where so-called deplorables are kidnapped and set loose on an estate for wealthy elites to shoot for sport. It's kind of like the Hunger Games, only with far more political commentary and far more laughs, if very dark ones. The heroine here is Crystal, played by Betty Gilpin, best known from the Netflix series Glow. Crystal, who's seemingly apolitical and surprised as to why she's included in the group being hunted, obviously has advanced military training and brings off a female Rambo here. She fights back with conventional and improvised weapons, all while gathering intelligence on her fellow captives and who's behind the project. This eventually leads her to the mysterious female 1%er CEO apparently in charge, and for the audience to one of the better choreographed female-on-female fight scenes you've ever witnessed. One of the best things about The Hunt is that it doesn't take sides. Neither the right or left are portrayed positively here. Indeed, both come across as caricatures, which seems to be the point. Without spoilers, this movie doesn't end with both sides coming together and discovering commonality, which could only come across as an insincere cop-out. Instead, The Hunt reflects how things are versus how we would like them to be. We are indeed a divided nation, with each side clinging to stereotypes of the other. The Hunt is a thoughtful, darkly humorous way to kill an hour and a half in uncertain times. But make no mistake, its message is one that's avoided at our peril. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Suzanne Bard. As long as humans have been building cities, wildlife has been fleeing from them. After all, cities are noisy, crowded, and dangerous for animals, including many birds. But we know that some birds do very well in urban areas.
So in many cities we have pigeons or doves, any kind of crow species.
University of Gothenburg biologist Ferran Sayal. He and his colleagues are interested in why some birds thrive in urban environments. They suspected that having a large brain in relation to overall body size could be an advantage.
Having a big brain gives you more behavioral flexibility. So, for instance, in cities, maybe these big brain species are better able to identify opportunities for finding food, also to identify dangers in the city.
But this scenario doesn't account for birds like pigeons, which are decidedly lacking in the brain power department. Sayal and his colleagues analyzed the relative brain sizes of 629 bird species from 27 cities around the world, as well as their tolerance for urban life. They found that birds that flourish in cities come in two extremes. They're either big-brained, but produce few offspring over their lifetime, or they're small-brained and super fertile.
So then this means that we have these two opposing strategies. So for species that have low frequency of reproduction, if they have a large brain, they are good urban dwellers. Or you have a small brain, but you reproduce frequently. For example, pigeons, if they start breeding and if they lose these eggs, then they can start to breed again almost immediately. It's like spreading the risk. So if you lose one, it's not a big deal.
Sayal says that both of these extreme examples of what are technically known as life history strategies tend to be uncommon in nature.
When we go to the city, we start to see that the few species that have these strategies become more and more abundant.
Meanwhile, in natural habitats, the vast majority of birds have average-sized brains.
The ones that have average brain, they are less and less abundant in cities.
The study is in the journal Frontiers in Ecology and Evolution. Understanding how brain size, behavioral flexibility, and life history traits interact can help researchers predict how species will respond to a rapidly urbanizing planet, where survival can mean taking it to the extremes. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Suzanne Bard.
This is a message from CDC.
After hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods, standing water and excess moisture help mold grow in your home, garage, and other structures. When you return to a home that has been flooded, know that you're likely to have mold. Mold puts your family's health at risk. If you have mold growing in your home, you should clean it up and fix other water problems, such as leaks in roofs, walls, or plumbing. Keep your children and pets out of affected areas until you've cleaned. Control moisture in your home to prevent mold growth. To remove mold growth from hard surfaces, use commercial products, soap and water, or a bleach solution of no more than 1 cup of household laundry bleach in 1 gallon of water. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never mix bleach with ammonia or other household cleaners. It will produce dangerous, toxic fumes. Open windows and doors to provide fresh air.
For more information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
For an expectant mother, taking care of her developing baby means taking good care of herself. One way she can do this is by ensuring she gets vaccinated. If a woman is or might be pregnant during flu season, it's especially important to get her annual flu shot, preferably before the end of October. In addition, women should be vaccinated against whooping cough during the 3rd trimester of each pregnancy. Failure to get vaccinated places both mother and baby at increased risk for serious complications of these infections, including hospitalization and even death. If you're pregnant or planning to get pregnant, ask your healthcare provider when you should get your vaccines. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Sweetie, want some fruit? You have to use the right tool for the job. A power drill is the wrong tool to slice fruit. Just like an antibiotic is the wrong tool to treat viruses, including colds and flu. Antibiotics are only needed for certain bacterial infections. When they aren't needed, antibiotics won't help you, and the side effects could still hurt you. Ask your healthcare professional when an antibiotic is the right tool and when it's not. Visit cdc.gov/antibiotic-use.
The This is an important message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. After a storm or disaster, it's important to eat only safe food. Throw away perishables like meat, poultry, fish, eggs, and leftovers stored above 40 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 hours or more. Throw away food with an unusual odor, color, or texture. Throw away food that may have come in contact with floodwater, including food in swollen, punctured, and damaged cans. When in doubt, throw it out.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. Persuaded that his election would help cement support for the new government, George Washington reluctantly agreed to serve as the nation's first president. He likened his feelings on once again taking up the burdens of public service to those of a culprit who is going to the place of his execution. Washington was inaugurated first president of the United States on April 30th, 1789. He served 2 terms, guiding the new government through the organization of the executive branch, founding the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., opening the West for settlement, and establishing precedents that have influenced the conduct of succeeding presidents ever since. Constitutions do not become real without the institutions necessary to implement them. It fell primarily to Washington to give flesh and blood to the executive branch and the national government generally during the first critical years. That's all for today's podcast. 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
What does the coronavirus teach us about our election system? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. On Tuesday, March 17th, Arizona, Florida, and Illinois held their primaries as planned, but Ohio postponed its primary, as have other states, including Georgia, Maryland, and Louisiana, and for good and not pretextual reasons. The coronavirus could put at risk voters and poll workers, and fear of being infected by the virus could keep many voters away from the polls altogether. But actually going to the polls should not be a prerequisite for voting. Some states allow voting by mail. Absentee ballots traditionally required a good reason why the voter couldn't vote on Election Day, but some states are now allowing no excuse necessary absentee ballots. And some states allow early voting, which increases turnout and would reduce the possibility of infection and fear of being infected. The failure to disallow early voting, no excuse absentee voting, and voting by mail, as a practical matter, these function as a method of voter suppression. Of course, none of these methods for allowing people to vote is required, even though these methods enhance voter participation and democratic principles and the constitutional principle of one person, one vote. Nonetheless, not having these methods of voting still conforms to the laws of the states where the voting occurs, and those laws will remain in effect unless and until they are changed. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1963. That was the day that the New York Times ran the headline, "New York happy as papers return." The longest and largest newspaper strike in the city had ended. During the early 1960s, changes in typesetting technology were transforming how newspapers were made. Members of the International Typographical Union worried the technology would undermine their work. Around 2 in the morning on December 8, 1962, ITU Local 6 called for a strike, demanding improved wages. Members were mostly Irish, Italian, and Jewish men. The newspaper workers at 4 papers, including the New York Times, walked off the job. 3 more major papers feared their workers would join the strike and preemptively locked out their workers. Newspapers were part of the fabric of social life of the Big Apple. In 2009, well-known journalist Nora Ephron described the impact. "It was like part of the blood supply of the city was cut off. Funerals in the city saw a dip in attendance as obituaries went unprinted. In all, 17,000 newspaper workers, from typesetters to reporters to elevator operators, participated in the work action. The strike lasted 114 days. 600 million newspapers were not printed. The strike cost newspaper owners $100 million in lost advertising revenue. In the end, the strike was finally settled, and the workers won a wage increase. But they did not win any guarantee against the implementation of new industry technology. A few months after, the newspaper The Daily Mirror closed up shop, blaming the workers and the strike for deepening its existing financial troubles. And not surprisingly, both the Times and the Herald Tribune used the strike as an excuse to double the price of a newspaper from a nickel to a dime.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
I'm Mark Boulanger.
The system is rigged, but we can fix it.
One of the most prominent voices in the United States arguing for stronger unions and less power for the wealthy is Robert Reich. Mr. Reich is a professor at the University of California at Berkeley. His new book is The System: Who Rigged It? How We Fix It.
The concentration of wealth in America has created an education system in which the super rich can buy admission to college for their children, a political system in which they can buy Congress and the presidency, a healthcare system in which they can buy care that others cannot, and a justice system in which they can buy their way out of jail. Almost everybody else has been hurled into a dystopia of bureaucratic arbitrariness, corporate indifference, and the legal and financial sinkholes that have become hallmarks of modern American life. Today, the great divide in American politics isn't between right and left. The underlying contest is between a small minority who have gained power over the system and the vast majority who have little or none. The super wealthy have reorganized the market to make themselves even wealthier. Since 1980, the percentage of the nation's wealth owned by the richest 400 Americans has quadrupled from less than 1% to 3.5%, while the share owned by the entire bottom half of America has dropped to 1.3%. The three wealthiest Americans own as much as the entire bottom half of the population. Big corporations, CEOs, and a handful of extremely rich people have vastly more influence on public policy than the average American. Wealth and power have become one and the same. As the oligarchs tighten their hold over our system, they've lambasted efforts to rein in their greed as socialism, which to them means getting something for doing nothing. But getting something for doing nothing seems to better describe the handouts being given to large corporations and their CEOs. General Motors, for example, has received $600 million in federal contracts and $500 million in tax breaks since Donald Trump took office. Much of this corporate welfare has gone to executives. GM employees, on the other hand, have faced over 14,000 layoffs and the closing of 3 assembly plants and 2 component factories. Our system, it turns out, does practice one form of socialism for the rich. Everyone else is subject to harsh capitalism. Socialism for the rich means people at the top are not held accountable. Harsh capitalism for the many means most Americans are at risk for events over which they have no control and have no safety nets to catch them if they fall. What do we do about it? The answer is found in politics, and it's rooted in power. The way to overcome oligarchy is for the rest of us to join together and form a multiracial, multi-ethnic coalition of working-class, poor, and middle-class Americans fighting for democracy. This agenda is neither right nor left. It's the bedrock for everything America must do. The oligarchy understands that a divide-and-conquer strategy gives them more room to get what they want without opposition. Lucky for them, Trump is a pro at pitting native-born Americans against immigrants, the working class against the poor, white people against people of color. His goal is cynicism, disruption, and division. Trump and the oligarchy behind him have been able to rig the system and then whip around to complain loudly that the system is rigged. But history shows that oligarchies cannot hold on to power forever. They are inherently unstable. When a vast majority of people come to view an oligarchy as illegitimate and an obstacle to their well-being, oligarchies become vulnerable. In order for real change to occur, in order to reverse the vicious cycle in which we now find ourselves, the locus of power in the system will have to change. The challenge we face is large and complex, but we're well suited for the fight ahead. Together, we will dismantle the oligarchy. Together, we will fix the system.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about caring for each other through global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin, weather from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 37 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting nearly the same temperature and forecast yesterday, which was around 50 degrees. Overnight lows last night dipped into the freezing level. We are still under an active freeze watch, though 37 is not too bad. I took great care anyway with the plants that I have put out because of these possible freezes overnight. Partly cloudy this morning, increasing clouds with periods of rain in the afternoon, expecting to bring us about a little bit more than 1/10 of an inch. Winds are out of the northwest currently at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Some clouds tonight. Overnight lows in the mid-30s. Winds will be out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And tomorrow, intervals of clouds and sunshine with highs in the mid-50s. And winds north at 5 to 10 miles per hour. We are expecting rain maybe Friday to Saturday and then through the weekend. As of today, this morning, we now have 21 confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County, Oregon. Grass pollen is rated low. The air quality index regionally is good at 33 parts per million. And the daytime UV index has spiked into the high range at 6. Wow. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.17 inches, and visibility is at 10 miles. Humidity is slated or is at 86%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 48 and cloudy with coronavirus. Paris is 56 and sunny with coronavirus. Rome is 56 and sunny with lots of coronavirus. Kyiv is 43 and fair with we don't know how much coronavirus because Vlad controls the game there, and he lies. Kabul is 47 and partly cloudy with coronavirus. Hong Kong is 65 and cloudy, and the coronavirus is decreasing, but they're expecting another spike, because that's how it's been happening. Tokyo is 55 and cloudy with coronavirus, and they're not taking international mail right now. Sydney, Australia is 70 and mostly cloudy with coronavirus. San Francisco, California is 48 degrees and sunny with coronavirus. And New York is a crisp 45 degrees Fahrenheit, sunny with coronavirus. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. The ever-present anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Furloughed crews from crisis-hit Scandinavian airline SAS are taking a 3-day course in basic hospital duties to help plug gaps in a Swedish healthcare system strained by thousands and thousands of coronavirus cases. The airline, part owned by the governments of Sweden and Denmark, temporarily laid off 10,000 staff, or 90% of its workforce. That's 90. And that was to cut costs and ride out a plunge in air travel due to the pandemic and related border closures this month. With Stockholm's healthcare system in need of reinforcement as cases rise, Köpenhamn University Hospital is teaching former cabin crew skills such as sterilizing equipment, making hospital beds, and providing information to patients and their relatives. The first students are due to complete the course on Thursday, tomorrow, and the response has been overwhelming. We now have a long list of healthcare providers that are just waiting for them. Joanna Adami, principal at the university, said airlines in Australia and the U.S. have also inquired about using the training methods for their staff. She said municipalities, hospitals, and nursing homes have all been queuing up to employ the retrained staff, who will number around 300 in the coming weeks. And Sweden has around 45 confirmed cases of the virus and 180 deaths, with the capital especially hard hit.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Andrea Shalal and Leigh Thomas of Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Paris Club of Creditor Nations agreed to restructure Somalia's debt, including immediately canceling $1.4 billion owned by the impoverished Horn of Africa country. 3 decades of conflict have left Somalia all but cut off from the global financial system, and relief from its debt is expected to open the way for new sources of financing for the country. The decision, first reported by Reuters, cancels 67% of the debts owed to Paris Club creditors by Somalia. It came after more than 9 hours of discussions. And that was by video conference, by the way. Somalia finance minister called the decision a big step forward for his country, which is also grappling with the coronavirus outbreak and a recent desert locust swarm. Locusts! We had a very productive discussions with the Paris Club, and we welcome their support in relieving Somalia of a substantial amount of its debt to them, the minister said. He said the Somali government would hold separate bilateral discussions with the creditors to finalize the process. He said his government would continue the economic reforms it had undertaken over the past 8 years to enable the debt relief. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on, and we'll meet up here tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.